So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hamburg. It's a pleasure to welcome you here at the Germanischer Lloyd premises. We have been asked by World Institute for Logistics, the CEO, to help to develop a standard for the effectiveness of container terminals. And I think it might be a very good idea, Kieran,
yes,
if you explain the background story.
Very good. I was going to put some slides up, but maybe it's just as easy to explain.
Yeah. You can also have the slides.
Yeah, I think they're not. They would need a little bit more, but I can explain it very simply to you. So, the Global Institute of Logistics is unique in the sense that it's a multi-stakeholder agency. So, it's not biased to any particular party in the supply chain. So its members are drawn from all of the nodes. Because the ultimate aim of the Institute when it was formed was to, I suppose, promote relationships across the entire supply chain from a global perspective. I will send you some information further, but its founding chairman was Bob Delaney, who's a very well-known US logistician. And his argument was that regardless of which KPIs you measured in the supply chain process, if you could work on the relationships between the parties, you would guarantee a better service at the end of the day. Regardless of any, that's not to suggest you give a bad service and have a good relationship, but where you have a good service offering, you were able to maximize it on the basis of joined up thinking, able to understand that the guy that was collecting from you or delivering to you, understanding his needs and requirements were paramount in orchestrating the change. So we went from a private members body within the European Institute of Transport from 1995 to 2000 to become a fully fledged global institute in 2002 based in New York, and since then we've been building this global consensus. So we're a not-for-profit organisation and we're concerned with building consensus globally. Our main aim is to aggregate best practice and to educate logisticians in the global supply chain as to what is best practice and more practically how to source, purchase and do logistics on a global scale. So frankly, we think that the natural custodian of the supply chain is ever increasingly becoming the beneficial cargo owner. So quite a percentage of our membership is drawn from the big box beneficial cargo owners across the world. And we have two status of members. We have gentlemen who are executive directors and members of the Institute, and we have observers. So in Germany, for instance, Karstadt Quell would enjoy observer status. So that would be 60,000 TEU out of southern China. Yeah? Okay. So if you go further west, or further east, Carrefour with observer status. Otto have observer status. Executive director status is held by Kingfisher, the B&Q brand. When we go into the US, we have executive director status at Home Depot, observer status at Sears, Toys R Us, Hasbro. So as you aggregate the shippers that we are most aligned with, they're maritime driven, they're containerized in how they do their logistics, and they really are the key influencers on this program. From their perspective, the most important thing that they can achieve as shippers is reduce the number of days that their inventory, number of days that they have in inventory. Best in class now is 52 days. Organizations with 52 days in inventory are growing at 8.5% per annum, are growing at 16.5% per annum and producing profits of 8.5%. Wall Street have now identified that organizations with 72 days in inventory grow at 5% and produce a profit, or grow at 8% and produce a profit of 5%. So Wall Street has finally agreed that if you want a good share tip, if you want to decide who the winners in the future will be in high street retail, one of the simplest KPIs to work with is the number of days in inventory. So really the gloves are off. Supply chain has now become one of the critical disciplines by which we judge the performance of an organization. And when we try to get from 72 days to 52 days, and that becomes your task, you have two choices. If you're best in class, we would describe Carsten Quell's logistics practice as best in class. If you go inside with Dr. Merkel or indeed Stefan Gratz and ask them how do you get from 72 to 52, they say with visibility, sir. Only with visibility. You've got to show me the 72 days to start with, and then as the custodian of the supply chain, as the person most concerned with the reduction. Not all logisticians are concerned with reducing the number of touches and the amount of time, because obviously that's how we make money in this business. The more we touch something as logisticians, well, obviously, the more invoices we raise. The shipper really wants it touched less and less, and he wants to pare down these days. In the hinterland, in the origin logistics piece, they have relatively good transparency. So we see offerings through OOCL Logistics, NYK Logistics, Maersk Logistics, and generally speaking, they're able to give quite good visibility in the origin hinterland. So between Cheku or between Guangzhou and Yantian, you can get quite good transparency. Yes, OOCL will offer you Pilot as the IT platform on which they execute with you. And Pilot is very, very good. But when Pilot comes to the terminal, and by the way, Pilot is just analogous for all shippers, and they find that there's an information disconnect. And that for the period of time that their goods or commodities are inside the terminal, they describe it as a black hole. They talk about having to determine the status of the container based on logical conclusion as opposed to actual transaction evidence. So, whereas all of their visibility is being based on transactional evidence in the hinterland, they now find themselves depending on logical conclusion. Logical conclusion is not safe, reliable, or accurate. It's instinctual, but it's not accurate. So we, in continuing to benchmark best-in-class global supply chains in 2003, 2004, the consensus was that unless somebody could bring transparency to this piece, if somebody could bring transparency to this particular piece, it would aid global end-to-end visibility, etc., etc. Best-in-class organizations doing 60,000 boxes can afford to track the information. They can harangue, they can to some extent bully, or they can buy a data input service to get the data. So for instance, in the case of OOCL and Carsten Quell, it's a team of 200 people dedicated to getting that visibility from them. What basically they want to know is they're obviously, their supply chain and logistics process is pretty much tied in. They want to know, just as soon as the MOL, the carrier, leaves for Europe, they want to start making decisions about where they're going, what's their port of well, obviously they're going to be coming into Hamburg or Bremerhaven or wherever it's going to be. But the decisions that they want to be able to make is, are they going to take that in the hinterland on the final mile? Are they going to use barge? Are they going to use rail? Are they going to use truck? In other words, they need to have visibility early so that they can make decisions about the final mile. And so best in class is probably all going to be around about having visibility. Right? We identified, so we were asked by all the stakeholders in the industry said, why not do a study? Who do terminals think they are? What do terminals think their role and function is? Where do they think the industry is going? Identify the terminals that you believe have a culture which is modern and forward thinking. Okay, so we ran a benchmark. We did our best to do a benchmark, and frankly, we very simply realised that the older the terminal, the more legacy it had, and the harder it was to even get information from them. We could get a list from Containerization International based on how many boxes they did, yeah, and then after that we didn't have very much information to work with. So research is done in two ways, as we all know: secondary and primary research. Our secondary research, which is the art and science of collecting published statistical data, yeah. When we looked at what we were able to collect in terms of published statistical data, we said this industry is being judged completely on the number of boxes, only on the number of boxes that it moves. There's no due care or attention given to the nature of the port. Is it import, is it export, is it transshipment? No, very few terminals want to tell us what their productivity levels are like, and there isn't an established set of metrics available whereby an objective person could adjudicate one terminal against another. Okay, so we've got one macro metric, and that's all we're being given to work with, and it tells us nothing. Yeah. So the only way we could get to our solution was to do more primary research. The primary research is very expensive because you've got to go to the terminal and you've got to find out who the customers are, and you have to interview the customers. That's the only way you can do it. So we spend a lot of time doing primary research. Now, frankly, if you go to Home Depot, they had just finished their own independent study for their own use. It was conducted by Rosa Hakala. And I said, why would you want to do an independent study yourself? And she said, because we need to know which terminals to specify to our carriers. Because we realize that some terminals are better than others. So I said, well, can we look at the criteria you've used? And so on and so forth. And of course, the Home Depot story is very much centered around the Port of Savannah and what Doug Merchant did there with them, and there's a great success story there. But again, coming to it, even on the West Coast, they benchmark West Coast terminals. But the reality is that shippers, that story proved to me that shippers who want to get transparency around the terminals that they use have to do it themselves. Right? So they don't place any store or emphasis, or they've no real, they know that the TEU figures don't tell you anything. Okay? So we began to establish that. However, in doing that primary research, which only, I suppose, if you like, proved to us that it was really a black hole, we were also able to identify through the primary research who global shippers thought were best in class. Now, the amazing thing about best in class from their perspective was they would describe best in class, of course, as being a productive terminal. Yeah, of course, they understand that. It needs to be a productive terminal, right? Not all terminals are productive. But frankly, what shippers want included in the best in class status is the culture of the terminal. Of course, they want us to tell us what the terminals were like operationally, but they were as concerned about what the terminals were like organizationally, as opposed from operationally. So we began to describe it as productivity and connectivity, right? So best in class would be judged against these two key criteria: your productivity and your connectivity. When we finished the study, we, as a council, made presentations on all the terms that we found. It took a long time to do it, and we determined that Hutchison Port Holdings Yantian International Container Terminals in Shenzhen was the terminal that we felt best matched the criteria that we set out for best in class. We thought, well, apart from their growth, the Shenzhen story is in itself a miracle, an economic miracle. But in the middle of this, we found a terminal operator which had to be productive to deal with demand, but had as part of its strategy adopted an end user marketing program. So it seemed to us that the terminals that had come into the business in the last 15 years had a different attitude about how to grow their business. The terminals that came into business in the last 15 years have a dilemma. The carriers won't come unless the cargo is in the hinterland, and the hinterland doesn't develop unless the carriers are coming to the terminal. So you have this kind of a race going on. Does the ship follow the cargo? Does the cargo follow the ship? The more diplomatic terminal developers then decided on a dual strategy. They decided, look, it's as important to have our customer's customer happy as it is to have our customer happy. So modern terminal operators were moving to a different strategy in terms of business development. Of course, they understood who paid the invoices, but they began to realize that if you could influence your customer's customer, you influenced your customer to come or to congregate or to put you in the order. So we began to notice that. Now, so how does a terminal behave that way? Well, we began to notice that the Yantian people were making direct contact with the shippers. Yeah? And they were beginning to talk to them about hinterland connectivity. And what Yantian were trying to do was to get visibility as far upstream as possible, right? Realizing that it would make their job easier, the greater the visibility they had. But in exchange for that participation at an early stage in the supply chain, they were offering value-added services. So we began to find that inland container depots were beginning to become part of a dream in China. Then they were also offering value-added services upstream, DC bypass. And what we began to notice was that terminals of the future, where they didn't have a space issue, or there's lots of issues to discuss here, right? But the point is that there is a new breed of terminal beginning to emerge, right? Which talks to its customer, adds value-added services, and understands that the supply chain is only as strong as its weakest link. They understand that the terminal has a unique part to play in the supply chain, in that it's a custodian of the cargo at a very critical juncture, and that those group of forward-thinking, what we call thought leaders in terminal development, if you meet these thought leaders, right, this is how they're thinking. They're thinking about connectivity, they're thinking about joined-up thinking, and they're thinking about how they can become more relevant. And they realize that this type of visibility will reduce this 72 days down. Remember, 20 of the 3 trillion that we spend on global logistics this year, 750 billion of it. So we break it down this way. We say 1.4 of it is carrying costs, real transport costs. We say the following 8 is all warehousing, and the last 7.5 is all inventory, actual inventory. We know that shippers build up safety stock because they can't rely on the supply chain to deliver. So we have a huge amount of inventory tied up in this piece, and this is the piece that we're now looking at. How do we reduce inventory? And if you consider that 10% of the inventory is there purely because the system isn't reliable or we don't have visibility, we see that's some of the low-hanging fruit that people are going to go for. So, when we came back and reported to the council, this is what we found out. This was the most frustrating research project we've ever done. We've never found anything as difficult in all our life. 2% of our research is secondary. Normally your secondary research is 70% and your primary research is 30%. Right? That's normally your balance. 2% of what we're going to tell you is secondary research, and 98% is primary research, which is about 100,000 air miles. Right? And it's hundreds of interviews. That's the only way we could drag the information out of the stakeholders. So there is no real system there for logisticians to adjudicate best in class. Now I put it to you, I think we stayed in a 5-star or a 4-star in Madison. I would say it's probably 5-star, maybe it's 4. But the reality is that, you know, I didn't have to, that hotel operates to a standard. I'm visiting Hamburg. I could have spent 3 days doing primary research trying to find out which is the hotel I could stay in. I don't have time for that. The hotel industry have a ranking system. They make it available to me online, guidebooks, every possible way. And they're saying, you don't have time for primary research, here's a guide to the hotels in Hamburg, and we have a star system. Okay? And frankly, I think the good news is the 5-star guide charges you more. So I'm not suggesting that somewhere in this, one of the paybacks for the industry to be seen best in class in the future might be that they might be able to charge a premium for their services. But what I'm saying is that there's no proper adjudication system in the market, and albeit that we found Yantian, and albeit that we accredited Yantian as best in class, albeit that we did that, the primary finding we got from the research was that there needed to be a better system of adjudication, and there needed to be an established set of metrics. There needed to be a better way of looking at this. So I forgot about that program very quickly. That's all I have to say about that. Let's get on and do the next research program. And the next research program that we did was benchmarking the drayage, some of the very big forwarding-based logistics companies, like most of them German, against each other to see how they leveraged relationship orientation and how they did their business. And the shortlist boiled down to 3 German companies. And while researching Hellman, which was one of the 3 at this stage, this is about a year after we've done the ports thing now, okay? While researching Hellman, it came to our attention that Joost Hellman's vision to develop a perishable supply chain globally was either the rock he was going to perish on or the rock on which he was going to make a name for Hellman. He established that perishable logistics was a global supply chain that needed to be addressed. And as he started to develop the infrastructure around perishable logistics, as he just started to get the business off the ground, he began to notice that the claims to the insurance industry for damage to perishable goods in transit was going to really kill this industry. So they created an organization called the Cool Chain Association. And the first piece of work they decided to do was to find a standards agency or a classification body that would hammer out a standard that they could use to determine which partners to use in a global cool chain. And they came to Bernard, and they've hammered out a standard, which when we came to talk to Bernard about Hellman's attitude to, we thought that this was a very good attitude on behalf of Hellman, to want to get that deep into the industry, to want to give that back. No PLC would have done it. It had to be somebody who was committed to it on a personal basis, as far as I'm concerned. And in talking to Bernard about how they did it, when I began to see the point system, I began to realize that Germain Lloyd had developed an intellectual property which could be used to measure process. Because it's very easy to give points for the quality of the engineering of that spoon, because it's a spec, is it this quality, and of course this is the history of classification, it's technical. However, it's a much different thing to measure the quality of the hospitality in this room right now. How would you adjudicate that? So a process is a much more difficult thing to measure. However, within Cool Chain, because it is a combination of both software and hardware being the temperature control devices that you use, software being how well your staff are trained, the attitude towards it. What they were able to do in developing that standard was create a point system and weight it against the processes. So when I saw it and got very deep into it, I took it back to the Maritime Logistics Council, which Will Aguilar is an executive director of, and I said, hey guys, this system of adjudicating this intellectual property, if we apply it to our dilemma around terminals, could be a way in which we get to measure the terminal property. Here, Gustav, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Gustav, good morning. Hi. Gustav, good morning.
Agua.
Yeah.
Will?
Water?
The best one is still free.
Share it. If you wish.
So when I asked Bernard about how do you get from the concept of a standard to reality, he said, well, look, this is how it works. You need to have an independent industry expert who understands the industry independently, academically and practically. And then you need a group of benchmark best-in-class terminals who will agree to come together to share their best practice. And between those two different audiences, you aggregate and you get to the bottom line and create the system. When we looked inside the world of global maritime logistics and we tried to find our industry expert, everybody asked us that, everybody said it should be Dr. Money, who's just arrived. And Gustav has been working at the heart of containerized logistics since right from the beginning. I think he tells the story that his first job, somebody said, I think containers had just more or less taken off. And they thought, I think a lot of people thought containers would never take off. I'm sure it's like everything else in life. So that was the job they gave him. You look after that bit. And that's what he's been doing ever since. And in that, over those decades, Gustav has grown to become a leading independent commentator on the development of the industry, but also a leading thinker inside the productivity piece with inside terminals. And today offers consultancy services to possibly people in this room and right around the world about how it is that you get the most out of your acreage or your infrastructure, etc., etc. So one of the early things that we did in the process that we're now, this is another stage of the process getting here. We always talked about a Hamburg committee and what it would do. It's amazing that we're actually sitting in a Hamburg committee meeting because we had a vision and now we're beginning to see the provision. So obviously the vision had some merit because visions kind of die very quickly unless there's something to them. But I think that there is such a weight of, the industry is so hungry to resolve this, right, in the pursuit. The journalists say to me that it's a test case for collaborative thinking. Everybody understands that no one person can supply the global supply, will control the global supply chain, that the future is welcome to the century of collaboration. They see this project as a litmus test for how mature we are about understanding that early. So the shippers want it for obvious reasons. The terminals want it for obvious reasons. Now, I'm not saying not the best in class terminals are obviously doing a great job and away we go, but there are a lot of terminals out there that are laggards or not best in class who would love to be able to benchmark themselves. The landlords want the system. You know, we have Barry Sedlick, who's the assistant to Schwarzenegger in California, who's our greatest supporter. And we go, well, why do you, he said, look, we own the land, and they want $4 billion from us this year to unchoke California. The $4 billion that we're raising through Wall Street is all public-private money. So it's not tax money, it's public-private money run by bond guys. And one of the things they keep asking us is, are you putting your money into best-in-class projects? He says, we have 13 terminals down here in LA Long Beach, and we have no way of knowing, and there's no adjudication system for me to go back to a guy who just simply wants a certificate to say, look, we're putting our money into what's best. So the landlords are coming and saying, the International Association of Ports and Harbours, Fer Vandelaar, who was at our meeting in Antwerp, yes, as landlords, if we could say to our tenants, this is the standard, it would be wonderful for us as if we thought that you were. So there's a kind of there is a consensus of support for it. Our job at the Institute is to collect that consensus and keep it on the track. So considering that we're not for profit and that our business is the business of diplomacy and our business is the business of relationships and getting people to talk to each other, that's who we are in this game. We're literally the platform on which we're asking people to meet. Marshall Lloyd, having looked at the other standards agencies, having looked at the other, we don't think any of the other standards agencies that we've benchmarked simply have the intellectual property that Coolchain has delivered to this particular division of Marshall Lloyd. We've found Dr. Money. We've established who we think the terminals are that have the best practice. They're here today. And now we're trying to move it on to another level. And I'll finish by saying, at the beginning of this year, when we took instruction from the stakeholders, they said, okay, do a dinner in Europe, bring these people, then go to Long Beach, bring these people, and then go to Hong Kong and bring these people. So at each of those dinners we had about 35 individuals. At each of those dinners, the 35 individuals were again right across the spectrum. So in Antwerp, we had PSA, we had Hutchison Port Holdings, we had ECT, we had a strong cross-section from that hinterland. When we went to Long Beach, we had, again, a strong cross-section there. When we went to China, we had China Merchant Holdings, Dr. Fu, we had Hutchison, and again, so we've had 100 opinions on the subject around the world so far, okay? And what we're now trying to do is come to the stage in the game